for taking care of all of that for us. I'm Veronica Patterson, and we thank the Loveland Public Library, our liaison and technical wizard now, Rebecca Strine, friends of the Loveland Public Library, the Loveland Museum and Gallery, the City of Loveland, the Writing Lab, the Poet Laureate team, Lynn Kincannon, Eve, I'll just say first names, Lori, Nancy, and BJ, Emily. These are people that help put the whole thing together, and the Poet Laureate program. But most of all, as I said last night, all of you for being here and being ready to work with Rosemary, which is play. Rosemary Wahtola Trommer lives on the banks of the San Miguel River in southwest Colorado. She served as the third Colorado Western Slope Poet Laureate, 2015 to 2017, the first San Miguel County Poet Laureate, 2007 to 2011, was a finalist for Colorado Poet Laureate just recently, and co-hosts Emerging Form, a podcast on the creative process. She's the co-founder of Secret Agents of Change, instigating global random acts of kindness, which we need. And she co-directs Telluride's Talking Gourds Poetry Club. I'm not going to read all of the rest of her honors, but I am going to read a line from a poem I saw this morning that was written in 1822. I'm a member of the Cloud Appreciation Society, which originates in Britain and sends you a cloud formation with information, art, and poetry every day. And this is from Bernard Barton's To the Sun. The last line of his little quatrain is dispensing light and life on every side. That's Rosemary. Thank you, Rosemary. Go ahead.
Thank you, Veronica. And thanks so much to everyone this morning, Rebecca and Lynn and Lori and all of you for showing up. What a pleasure to join you on a Saturday morning. And we're going to play. And anyone who's taken a class with me before knows that I like to call them play shops instead of workshops. That's certainly kind of how I think about writing in general. Even when we're writing about the most difficult, painful subjects, I still think there's an opportunity for play to show up, and it's in that spirit I hope you'll join this morning. And I thought I'd start with a little invocation, this one from Robert Frost that I've mixed with a song that comes from the Yoruba people in West Africa. And the poem, I'm fairly certain you will recognize, but the lyrics to the song say, "That which has been created can never be destroyed." Ishe Oluwa. Some say the world will end in fire. Koleba Sheyu. Some say in ice. Ishe Oluwa. And from what I've tasted of desire, Koleba Sheyu, I hold with those who favor fire. Koleba Sheyu, but if it had to perish twice, Koleba Sheyu, I think I've seen enough of hate. Ishe Oluwa, to know that for destruction, ice is also great. Koleba Sheyu, and would suffice. Ishe Oluwa, Koleba Sheyu. Well, I guess I thought I'd start with that partly because in some ways it's feeling rather end of the world-ish, some of the things that have been going on. And there was Frost kind of helping us consider what's going to happen. Is it going to be fire? Is it going to be ice? I also wanted to start with that poem because it's a great exploration, I think, of how details can be used in a poem or not. And if we could, so this morning, I think you all know that's the theme of the day is delight is in the details. How do we choose the details to put in a poem? How do they inform the poem? How do they work? When do we want to make them more specific? When do we want to make them less specific, more general, more all-encompassing? When do we want to write about what isn't there? When does too many details bear down the poem? So we're just going to play with all of that today. We'll do a lot of writing. We'll read some poems that I think exemplify this well. And this one by Frost is one of them. If you think about it, he has very few specific details in this poem, right? He talks about fire and ice. That's about it in terms of detail. He's not talking about the very specific ways that it's going to crackle and burn and that it's going to be kindling and it's going to be wildfire. And just think about how very different, how burdened really that poem would be if he tried to talk very specifically about the ways that the fire was going to destroy the world, or the clutches, the frigidness, the frozen temperatures, the different kinds of ice crystals. No, that poem has, I think of as a very broad lens. And so for most of today, I want us to be thinking about lenses very specifically, and the poem in a way like a movie, right? Where, if you think about in a movie, oftentimes you begin with this big shot and then it comes in very close. And then you see all of a sudden you start out in outer space and then you come to like somebody's street and then it goes in even deeper and it's a mailbox and then it's a letter inside the mailbox. I think that poems have a lot to learn then from cinematography, and so just all day long and from now on, if you don't already, have this sense of lens and how does the lens work and how detailed do we want to make things, and how does it help sometimes to back off, and maybe we'll be able to make some generalizations about those poems too. But one massive disclaimer, I suppose, about anything that I ever say, any rule that you've ever heard, is that it's absolutely useless if that isn't what your poem wants. And I completely believe in the words of Jack Mueller, who's somewhat of the patron saint of poetry for me. He was a really wonderful, crazy, ridiculously wise and irascible man who lived here on the Western Slope for the last 20 years and died a few years ago. But Jack would say in this very gruff voice, "Obey the poem's emerging form." And that's what we should always do. So anything that I say today that seems to be getting in the way of your poem, by all means, obey the poem. Let the poem tell you what it wants and needs. All right, so let's jump in. Hopefully everybody has the handout. And if you don't, Rebecca put it into the chat bar and you would be able to download it from your chat bar. I'd love to take a look at a poem that's a little bit like this one that we did by Robert Frost. It's by Ty Freedom Ford. It's called "From Here I Saw What Happened and I Cried." And I'd love it if 2 people could volunteer to read this poem out loud. And to do so, you would just need to raise your hand down there as Rebecca taught you. And by the way, ideally, everybody has as many chances as possible to speak. So if you're the kind of person who volunteers a lot, I thank you for that because I need you to jump in. But if I notice that somebody hasn't been able to have a chance and you continue to volunteer, I will sometimes call on them first. At this point, however, nobody's raised their hand, which either means you don't know how or maybe I'll just call in some people that I can see and see if you're willing to read a poem. Let's see. I see Paula Lepp there. Paula, are you able to read the poem? And the other
unfortunately, I do not have the handouts.
You don't.
I don't think I can access that.
Friend, you can in the chat bar. You don't. I'll call on you later. But to get the handout, it's in the chat bar. How about Kathy Casper?
I looked for it, but I don't.
Look, Valerie Zarek has gotten it. So Valerie Zarek will have you read first. And Kathy Casper, are you able to read?
I'm able to read. This is Tilly.
Okay, perfect. We'll have Valerie read first and then Tilly. Thank you.
Which poem?
So we're going to read, the first poem in the handout is called "From Here I Saw What Happened and I Cried by Ty Freedom Ford. And again, what I want to pay attention to in this poem is Valerie's reading it. Pay attention to the details of the poem and how are they serving the poem. And just, we'll have a little conversation about that afterward.
Oh, from here I saw what happened and I cried. Ty Freedom Ford, after Carrie Mae Weems. The blood is red, the blues is red, the blues is blood, the red is dirt, the dirt is brown. The brown is red, the dirt is blood, the blood is blues, the blues is brown, the brown is skin. The skin is blood, the blood is kin, the kin is red, the red is blood, the blood is new, the new is skin, the skin is news, the news is brown, the brown is noose, the noose is red, the red is blues, the blues is dirt, the dirt is skin, the skin is blues, the blues is kin, the kin is brown, the brown is blood, the blood is news, the news is black, the black is new, the new is red, the red is noose, the noose is black, is blues, is brown, is red, is blood.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, friend. Okay, and this time when you hear the poem, I'm going to invite you just to sit back and close your eyes and just kind of let it wash over you, have an experience with the poem. Tilly, you're on.
From here, I saw what happened and I cried. Ty Freedom Ford, after Carrie Mae Weems. The blood is red, the blues is red, the blues is blood, the red is dirt, the dirt is brown. The brown is red, the dirt is blood, the blood is blues, the blues is brown, the brown is skin. The skin is blood, the blood is kin, the kin is red. The red is blood, the blood is new, the new is skin, the skin is news, the news is brown, the brown is noose, the noose is red, the red is blues, the blues is dirt, the dirt is skin, the skin is blues, the blues is kin, the kin is brown, the brown is blood, the blood is news, the news is black, the black is new, the new is red, the red is noose, the noose is black, is blues, is brown, is red, is blood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, both of you. Let's have just a small conversation. Please do go ahead. If you need a refresher on how to raise your hand, it should be there in chat. So if you go to participants, click on that on the bottom of your screen. There should be a place down there where it says that you can in the actual bar there's a place where you should be able to raise your hand. It's a little blue hand, and I think it actually says raise hand. What do you notice about this poem? How is it working or not working, I suppose? What's happening or not happening in terms of the details that are being used? Melissa.
Yeah, you know, one thing I noticed is that there is repetition, of course, a lot of repetition, and yet it's not like typical repetition. There are these subtle changes in each one that take you somewhere else. And so it has a mantra feeling and a sort of mesmerizing feeling because of the repetition. And yet it isn't plain repetition. And so I love that hybrid quality about it.
Yes, it's a repetition that continues to change and morph and transition. Yes, very nice, very nice. Just quickly, if you have not been able to get the handout yet from the chat bar, Rebecca has offered that she will email it to you. So you can put your email address in the chat bar and Rebecca will email you the handout. Let's see, and let's hear from you, Thea Schiller.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here from New York. I would like to say that what's astonishing about this poem is that there, besides the colors, and we have associations with these colors, the poet Weems is using a few items, kin, a noose, and we all have, I guess we're all contemporaries because we're all alive and it's 2020. So we all know what's kind of come our history politically of what's happened, let's say, with the past 100 years or so. So that without having to spell out some things, we all know what this poem is about. And it written in a very general way. So I think that's genius. So thank you.
I do too, Thea. I do too. So what's happening here in Ty Freedom Ford's poem, as Thea just so beautifully said, is she's relying on connotation. She's letting the words that she's chosen do a lot of work for her. And so, and I think all of us are familiar with these words: connotation, denotation. The denotation would be the definition of it, what the dictionary would say about it. But the connotation, when we hear the word noose, especially when we also hear the word brown, we have a whole bunch of cultural expectations about what the horror of what's really happening, even though she hasn't given us any of the details of that, right? So I really admire this poem for the ways that it, like Frost's Fire and Ice, right? It gives us a wide angle lens. She's not telling us anything. She's not telling us the specific colors of brown. She's not telling us anything like crimson or scarlet. No, she's just giving us red and letting us go with the connotative meanings of each of these words. So for most of this workshop, we're going to be looking at how to sharpen the lens, but I wanted to start with how powerful can it be when it starts way out here, when we see the big picture, and how important it is then to speak in less specific terms and more general terms, and then let the connotation do the work for us. Let's do a little game right now in connotation. I want you to go ahead, and we're just going to take about 5 minutes, well, not even 5, maybe 3 minutes. And I want you to, on the handout, but you don't need the handout for it. Don't worry if you don't have it. I'm just going to give you a few words. And with those words, I want you to just write some very specific images or connotative images that you have. So I'll give you 5 words. You won't have time to do them all, but pick which one interests you the most. Here are the 5 words: strength, green, anger, exhaustion, and orange. And we'll just take a few minutes, and I want you to write, ideally, 3 specific images that would go with each of those words. Now, each of those words is fairly abstract, or at least very general. Like the colors, I suppose, aren't abstract, but they're very general. But then I gave you a couple of abstracts: anger, exhaustion, and strength. And I want you to see if you can come up with 3 very specific, detailed images for those things. Go for it. Let's see what happens. Okay, and go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to, if you're willing to share. We'll hear from maybe 1 or 2 people. Laurel Becker, let's hear from you. And then we'll hear from Alvina Scott.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I had some kind of weird images came out for strength. I had a train unable to stop. With green meadows with no flowers, no flowers. For exhaustion, I had a pillow with no creases. Orange, those are the major ones. I had a flower bent to the ground with exhaustion, but I liked the pillow with no creases. That popped first. So
Very
those
good.
ideas that came up were just images that crossed my mind.
Wonderful. Great. Nice work. And how about you, Elvina?
Hi. My strength one actually isn't really an image. Strength, the feeling of my legs climbing the 2,000-foot rise at mile 81 in a 100-mile race, how incredulous I was that my body could just keep going, how much space I felt in my mind, realizing I was in the discovery of a new awareness. Green weeds, which are just more plants, pulling them this morning. One tall grass cut my thumb as I pulled, and I swear I could hear it say, "Hey."
Thank you. Thanks very much. And imagination went into that image too. And we'll hear from Paula Lepp and then we'll move on.
Hi, yeah, so for green, the first thing that popped in my mind was when I was teaching my daughter, who's now 16, how to drive. She would call the green light a go light. So when the red light, yeah, that's the stop light, and the green is the go light. So green always brings an image of moving forward and going. So that's the first thing that popped in my mind for green. And then anger, a red hot branding iron. And strength, just two arms open wide. So that
very nice. Wow, that's an interesting image for strength. Two arms open wide. What we're working with today, and what these all kind of exemplify, are not metaphorical images per se, but we're working with literal images. With how are you going to use an image to get across a feeling or an idea? And when we use metaphor, obviously we're making comparisons, but today I wanted to work very specifically on how do we let a thing as itself move us forward emotionally and intellectually. And I'm certain you've all heard, of course, the very famous, advice for poetry, show, don't tell. That's what the details are doing, right? The details are the showing. I actually hate that phrase, show, don't tell. I think it's garbage. I think, of course, what we should do is show and tell. That's what makes everybody love Mary Oliver's poems so much, is that she's constantly showing us the world. And by show, I don't mean just visual, but all the senses. And then she tells us what it's like to be inside a human body. What are our feelings? What are our thoughts? And she goes back and forth, show and tell, and show and tell. So just so we aren't going to go any more into that today, I don't think, but just so you know, garbage, show, don't tell. I don't think so. However, showing very, very important. And we do that with the details. We respond more to particular details. They'll pull us in a way that allows us to actually enter into that scene, to let us see and hear and smell, and all those sensory ways that we can access a scene, whether it's a lyric or a narrative poem. It doesn't much matter. Maybe even more important in a lyric poem. And in this way, the poem allows us to enter into its imagination. So I want us to look at another example of a poem right now. Let's take a peek at I Want to Speak with the Blood That Lies Down by Jim Tipton. It's on the last 2 pages of the handout. It starts on the penultimate page, and then it goes to the last page. James Tipton, for anybody who didn't know him, I know a lot of you probably did. One of my favorite human beings to ever walk the planet. He was a magic man, honey. He was a beekeeper. He was a poet. He was a stockbroker. He was a teacher. And he wrote these fabulously sensual poems collected in a book called Letters from a Stranger. one of my favorite books of poetry to this day. And this poem is from that collection. You can still get it on Amazon. I don't think you can probably get it any other way, but at this point, but I would love 2 volunteers for I Want to Speak with the Blood That Lies Down. And we have Karen Stevenson. Thanks, Karen, for volunteering. And then we have Christy. Great. And Milt will get you next time. So the first time you're listening to this, I hope if you have it printed out, go ahead and underline any word or phrase, image that stands out to you. If you don't have it printed out, just in your mind, imagine you're underlining. And then the second time you hear it again, I love when you just close your eyes and instead of reaching for the poem for meaning, just let the poem wash over you as an experience. So let's see, Karen will have you read it first and Christy will have you read it second.
I want to speak with the blood that lies down each night to sleep inside your heart. I want to speak with these words that procreate like rabbits when I think of you. I want to speak with your virginal ribs, with a hand inside. I want to devour the mud that mocks all diamond flesh. I want to find a prayer that sticks, a clock that ticks only love, a time that turns this desperation into peace, a book with the moon on every page that only we can read together. I want to speak in one interminable sentence that can be understood in a single setting. I want to speak with the tired angels that live inside the shoulders of tiny children. I want to speak with cripples that meet in laundromats late at night looking for little boxes of soap. I want to speak with these clothes before I join them. I want to find the delicate violet that rises out of the dead volcano. I want to find the verb that shakes me loose, the noun that is the place I live, the comma that joins me with you. I want to speak softly and thoroughly and be clearly in you. I want to speak with apples and honey and silver and snow. I want everything to stop for a moment, destined for you and for me, for a time when we, butchered at birth, come back to life, rescued at last like children in a miraculous fairy tale. I want to speak with the dead who move like leaves in this night that blows its rapture toward the dislocated sea. I want to speak with the forgotten spring, with the light in the dead comet. I want to speak with salt and with the teeth I found in the desert and with wounded silence, ravenous solitude. I want to speak with Pablo Neruda and Christ and with the idiot brother of God and with the tunnel at the foot of the bed, with the corridors of all longing. I want to speak with these long nights of useless letters, with these boots that walk without me when I rest, and with the spirits that shake these feet when I lay me down to weep. I want to speak with the thirsty rain, the lonely garbage, the tire that remembers when it was a tree in Brazil. I want to speak with the fragrance of sage that rises up late into the night after a soft rain. I want to speak with cinnamon and chocolate, and with windows that do not open, and with the bag of hair in the shop of the old barber. I want to speak with the dance that rises in this body when like a distant bell come home. Your letter rings in me, whatever matters. I want to whisper love, 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 while this very hand is stretched to Sausalito, cradling your heart in sleep.
Oh, Karen, thank you. That was beautiful. All right, let's hear it again from Christy. And if you didn't close your eyes this time, last time, go ahead and do it this time.
I want to speak with the blood that lies down each night to sleep inside your heart. I want to speak with these words that procreate like rabbits when I think of you. I want to speak with your virginal ribs, with the hand inside. I want to devour the mud that mocks all diamond flesh. I want to find a prayer that sticks, a clock that ticks only love, a time that turns this desperation into peace, a book with the moon on every page that only we can read together. I want to speak in one interminable sentence that can be understood in a single sitting. I want to speak with the tired angels that live inside the shoulders of tiny children. I want to speak with cripples that meet in laundromats late at night looking for little boxes of soap. I want to speak with these clothes before I join them. I want to find the delicate violet that rises out of the dead volcano. I want to find the verb that shakes me loose, the noun that is the place I live, the comma that joins me with you. I want to speak softly and thoroughly and be clearly in you. I want to speak with apples and honey and silver and snow. I want everything to stop for a moment, destined for you and for me, for a time when we, butchered at birth, come back to life, rescued at last, like children in a miraculous fairy tale. I want to speak with the dead who move like leaves in this night that blows its rapture toward the dislocated sea. I want to speak with the forgotten spring, with the light in the dead comet. I want to speak with salt and with the teeth I found in the desert, and with wounded silence, ravenous solitude. I want to speak with Pablo Neruda and Christ, and with the idiot brother of God, and with the tunnel at the foot of the bed, with the corridors of all longing. I want to speak with these long nights of useless letters, with these boots that walk without me when I rest, and with the spirits that shake these feet when I lay me down to weep. I want to speak with the thirsty rain, the lonely garbage, the tire that remembers when it was a tree in Brazil. I want to speak with the fragrance of sage that rises up late into the night after a soft rain. I want to speak with cinnamon and chocolate, and with windows that do not open, and with the bag of hair in the shop of the old barber. I want to speak with the dance that rises in this body when, like a distant bell come home, your lettering's in me, whatever matters. I want to whisper, love, 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 while this very hand is stretched to Sausalito, cradling your heart in sleep.
Christy, thank you. It's so wonderful to hear poems in two voices, isn't it? It just makes me so happy I just hear things so differently when different people read. I'm always so grateful people do that. Thank you. All right, so there's so much to notice about this poem. It is a completely detail-laden, utterly rich poem. So what are some of the things that you notice? What stands out to you about this one? And here are some things I want to consider. I want to consider how specific is he? I want to consider how he blends abstracts and concretes. I want to consider fresh language versus cliche. I want to consider, again, connotation and denotation. And just what kind of lens is he using here? And how is it working? Who's willing to share something you notice about this poem, how it's working? What word or phrase or image? Marlene.
Well, I kind of didn't go with what you, the specifics, but it just felt like it was in saying I want to speak with all these different things was in a nutshell saying, and so broadly, I want to be everything and experience the life of everything that is, everything that exists.
Yes, this is wonderful. So through the breadth of the things that he offers to us, right?
Yeah.
He depicts this incredible willingness, right, to engage with the world, and not just with the beauty of the world, right? Some of these are very difficult images, right? But he's willing to enter into the big conversation and to meet it and to know it. Yeah. Nice. Thanks, Marlena. How about you, Milt? What did you notice?
I guess one line kind of really stuck out, especially in these times that we've been having with this pandemic. A clock that ticks only love, a time that turns this desperation into peace. Mm-hmm. Really hit home. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's take a peek at what he did there, because I think that's very interesting. A clock that ticks only love. I mean, what do we know about clocks, right? That they tell the time, and they tell it in a certain measure. They tell it in minutes and hours and seconds. And then he ends up using the concrete of the clock with an abstract of love, right? And he puts those two things together, which don't necessarily seem to go together. Anything else you want to say about that image, Milt?
Sorry, I couldn't get the arrow to move. I guess, I mean, that hits it pretty good. A time that turns this desperation into peace. I think it's a way of saying to yourself that, you know, even though we're desperate now, there will be a time that we won't be.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Very nice. I appreciate that too. So this is actually a little bit of an example of what I was saying before with the show and tell. In this case, this is more of a telling line, right? Less of a showing line and more of a telling line. He's talking about feelings. He's talking about ideas, as opposed to like the little boxes of soap in the laundromat. That's a showing line, right? And this is much more of a telling line about the feeling that he's hoping for. So by going back and forth between these, notice how that helps the poem to develop so that he goes back and forth between show and tell. I'm glad you brought that line up. Thanks, Milt. Susan, let's hear from you next. Then we'll hear from Carol, then Jack Martin, and then Paula. Susan Tideman.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do.
I see. I have to unmute. After you call on me, I need to unmute.
Perfect.
Okay.
Just for future reference, everyone, after I call on you, then you do need to unmute yourself. Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
Many of the things in the poems are usually regarded as inanimate objects. Tires. I mean, people in the laundromat are animate, but many of the things in the poem, clocks, are not regarded as animate, but he gives them feelings, but more than that, he wants to speak with them. He doesn't say speak to them. You can speak to a wall, you can speak to a tire, but with means they answer back. So his world is very alive.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said, Susan. Yes, that's I think one of the things that draws me into this poem so much is that it's an intensely sensual poem that feels like a very honoring poem. He's honoring the intelligence of the world around him. Thank you. Very important to notice. Carol, you're next, and then Jack Martin. This is Carol Henderson.
Hi. You mentioned cliche versus fresh language. So I really enjoyed When I Lay Me Down to Weep.
Yeah.
Because that's, could be such, when I lay me down to sleep, but weep, it really startled and delighted me. And I was also going to speak, the last speaker talked about how he anthropomorphizes things, which I really like the tire remembering being a tree in Brazil. I find that very lively when objects are given memory and life in that way. So I could go on, but that's enough for now. Thanks.
Yes, Carol, thank you so much. Yeah, you're exactly right that there is there's that one example of making language fresh is to take a cliche and subvert it just slightly, right? He subverted it through rhyme, right? When I lay me down to sleep is what the ear's expecting. So when he gives us weep, it just, so slightly shifts what we're expecting. And it is that delight that you mentioned. I can hear Jim reading this poem, by the way, like even listening to you while reading it, I was still hearing Jim reading it. And I must have heard him read it at least 50 times. And I wish I could hear it 100 more, but I can hear him when he would say that, and I could always feel in the audience kind of that joy, that pleasure, right? So as an audience member, we crave fresh language. And this is an example where he took and subverted the cliche, but I would suggest that there's so many other places where he's using fresh language in this. Like for instance, when he says something like ravenous solitude, right? That's such a curious pairing, right? Where he takes an adjective and a noun that don't seem to have anything to do with each other at all, and he lets us be curious about, well, what would ravenous solitude be? What would a wounded silence be? And by taking these kind of unexpected words and pairing them, he ends up allowing us to do some exciting work. Let's hear from Jack Martin next, and then from Kathy Casper.
What I'm seeing is that he's speaking the way the heart beats and the way the clock ticks. I want to. It's connected at the bottom. I want to whisper love, love, love. There's the other ticking of the heart. Excuse me. And there's a hand that's stretched to Sausalito. Clocks have hands.
Nice. Nice, very nice. And this is lovely what you bring up, Jack. I love that you've said this, because this is a sensual, intimate heartbeat of a poem, right? And he establishes this in multiple ways. One is just with this simple repetition, I want to speak, I want to speak, I want to, and it becomes rhythmic, like a heartbeat. But I also like to think about tone, and how do the words that we choose, how do the images that we choose set a tone? The tone of this poem is incredibly intimate, isn't it? And how I kind of marvel, Jim Tipton was a master at this, at creating an intimate tone. Not that, by the way, am I saying that intimate tone is the best kind of poem? No, I'm not saying that, but this poem very much wants to have an intimate tone, and he obeys the emerging form, right? He allows the poem to do what it wants to do, which is become intimate. How I always think about this. How has he created a poem that feels divinely intimate, still bringing up things like dead volcanoes and butchered at birth and cripples in laundromats? It's because, well, I'll go ahead and say, because I've brought this up out of sequence, but he sets up with this extra sensual language. If you look at the beginning, he has these words like, I want to sleep with the blood that lies down each night to sleep inside your heart. So he begins with something fairly sensual, and then he talks about the virginal ribs and the diamond flesh. And he kind of sets us up for this sensuality, again, through connotation. And then he'll step away from it and bring it back and keep delivering it again and again, stepping away, coming back, stepping away, coming back from this very deeply intimate language. So that the effect then, I think, is that he brings everything into that intimacy, into that with instead of to. I want to speak with instead of I want to speak to. So it's beautiful what he's accomplished here. Let's see, Kathy Casper. Let's have you next. Then Paula.
Okay, couple of things. Ravenous silence. So I think because that comes right after the desert, I saw raven jump out of the word ravenous.
Very nice, very nice.
That was just one thing. Another is the tires that remember. I think it's arrogant of us to presume that tires don't remember. and I think I love that. It reminds me of, well, I can't think of the book, but it's one of the Latin American writers who do the sort of miraculous truth writing. I can't think of the name.
Magical realism.
Magical realism, yeah. And so whenever there was sex in the house, the furniture glowed.
Right.
You know?
It's true that Jim Tipton was obsessed actually with magical realism and was in fact deeply obsessed with Isabel Allende, to whom he devoted this book, and she ended up writing the introduction to it also. But yes,
Wow.
So there is that kind of a playfulness in this poem also, right? Where he goes into imagination also, you know, where especially that little section where, you know, butchered at birth were two kids in this fairy tale, you know, then come together again. You know, he definitely takes it both very specific details and then into the imagination. We're going to hear from Paula Lepp. I know a few more people have their hands up, but I really do want us to have some time to write. So forgive me, friends. There are some places in some other comments that are already in that chat section. And if you want to share your comment about it, please go ahead in that chat section. But we'll just hear now from Paula Lepp, and then we're going to move into some writing. Let's hear what you have to say, Paula.
Okay, well, the first image that really struck me was the tired angels that live inside the shoulders of little children.
Yes.
And I just love that, because I could just see all these little tired angels sitting around. And when I was like, oh, fellas, I got to go again. Hang on, mine's at it one more time. So, and it just the image of a tired angel chasing around these little children, and the asking of how. That's what I would want to know. I would want to talk to the angels and go, how do you keep going through the exhaustion of protection? How do you keep going? And I think there's a lot of the hows in here. You know, to the delicate violet that rises from a dead volcano. It's like, how do you rise, delicate violet? So as I listened to that, that's the conversation that I felt like was going on, or that I could see in a lot of these, is how clock do you tick only love?
It does feel as if so many of these images that he's given us have stories in them, right? Like you could go into any one of them and find a much larger story, right? So, and how does he do that? He does that through very specific details, right? And by specific, I mean, he takes that lens and he goes nice and tight in on this image, right? And he also does it through fresh language, right? Tired angels. You know, they're not glowing angels. They're not like glorious angels. They're not beautiful angels. They're tired angels. So I want to invite you now we're going to do some writing. And I love the format of this poem and invite you to steal it, as Jim would have also. And Jim and I remember having a conversation about this one time, that the phrase "I want" is one of the most powerful phrases you can use in a poem. Probably bad for a Buddhist, but it's awesome for a poem. I want will always fuel curiosity and passion and interest and engagement. So if you would write an I want poem, and you could do it as general as you like you could just make the whole world your canvas of what do you want to speak with. You could also change, by the way, that phrase a little bit. Instead of I want to speak with, it could be I want to listen to, I want to walk with, I want to there are infinite possibilities there that I have all just run out of my mind. But what you get my point is that you can choose anything that you want to be doing with these other objects. You don't have to do I want to speak with, but I do want you to notice that part of the reason I think the poem does not get boring is because he does change it up a little bit. He doesn't always have that same I want to speak with, I want to speak with, I want to speak with. He changes that around. I want everything to stop. So he'll throw in another line. If you're going to go with a repetitive line like that, make sure that you sometimes break your form. Otherwise it will get boring. You'll get bored by it. So, and you'll notice when you start to get bored by it, and that's your poem telling you, hey, do something different. So you could also do this very simply with what's in the room around you. You could do it very simply by choosing a situation. I had a student in a class a few weeks ago who ended up having a conversation I want to speak with, and she chose Martin Luther King, and she chose everything that was around him, with the gun that shot him and the blood that came out, and she chose a historic moment. I loved this. I thought it was so creative. And then she went into all the things she could speak with that would have told that story. So we're going to play around with this. As you are playing with it, I want you to be curious, right, about the lens that you're using. When does it go in? When does it come out? I want you to think about, are your details fresh? How could you pair words? How could you pair adjectives and nouns together that we would never think to put together? So that we can have, like Paula Lepp said, this sense of, whoa, what's the story in that? What's the how in that? And if you want to, by the way, you can go into the how. Go for it. Just see if there's one of these things that really, you're so tickled by it, you want to speak with the brass candlesticks, and then they end up talking back to you. By all means, just stick with the brass candlesticks. But make sure that you're just playing around with the details of the poem. All right, it is my time, it's 10:01. We're gonna write until 10:20. And well, let's do till 10:15. Let's do 15 minutes and see how much we can get done in 15 minutes. Again, follow the emerging form. If your poem isn't doing what you think it's going to do or what I said it should do, let it do what it wants to. I'm imagining that you're probably right in the middle of something wonderful and resentful that I'm bringing you back. But for those of you who are just kind of finishing up the last line, go ahead. And before, I would like to hear a few of these. Obviously, we can't hear everyone's, but I would like before that to hear people talk about their process, to hear something about what you noticed about what happened as you were writing. Did it come right away? Was it frustrating? What did you notice about the details that you were using? I see Ken and Maria already have their hands up. I hope that's I'm grateful for you to have your hands up. Before I hear from anybody though about what you wrote, I definitely want to hear about process. So Ken, are you able to talk with us about what happened?
Yes. I turned back into early experience, travel as a college age kid to Greece. And so it started with I wanted to rather than I want to.
Oh, what a lovely way to shift things. And as you were writing, again, before we hear anybody's poems, let's just stick in the process part. What did you notice about what happened? Like, did it just show up for you, or did you struggle with it, or was it wrestling you, or were you stuck, or what happened with that?
It flowed for the first quarter or third, and then there was a pause, and I wanted to pull out some detail that I couldn't quite pull out of memory, and then it went back to flowing again, and came back around at the end.
Well, okay, very good. So this is interesting. I'm always most interested, by the way, in when things go wrong, right? And when things get stuck and we're like, oh, now what? Because that almost always has something to teach us, right? And so this is very interesting. In this case, Ken, it sounds like you wrestled with this detail. Did it ever show up for you?
Yeah. Because I was in memory, and so it was brass doors in Florence, Italy, and I was trying to remember who the artist was.
Very nice. So I do want to say that if we can't remember, one of the most beautiful, honest things to do in a poem is to say that you don't remember. And you can just say, I don't remember. Was the door made of wood? Was it carved like this? And that honesty, I think, just infuses the poem with a I don't know, with a humility, with a openness, I love when poems admit that they're stuck or that they don't know. Okay, so I see there are 4 hands up, and I'm going to go ahead and say that will be definitely all we'll have time for. Ken, let's hear your poem.
I wanted to live in Greece with demigods, move mountains, wanted souvlaki and baklava and ouzo every noon, wanted to hitchhike the Peloponnesus, and I did. Then I wanted to see everything in Italy, but I didn't. But I did see the 7 Hills and Michelangelo's Pietà, and David, and inscrutable brass doors and lots of terracotta. Then I wanted to visit all the countries and big cities and a million villages, and Bouzouki Zorba dances and Morris dances and Hindi and Aztec, and visit Preservation Hall in New Orleans, which I did. Now I want vagrant memories, those irascible vibrations that migrate from Kalamata olives and the Alais sweet corn, and the Vidalia onions that bring along the sweetest tears.
Oh, hey, wonderful. Nice job. Let's give him some finger flashes, you guys. So a couple things that I notice about Ken's poem that are really working. One is, of course, that he has all this exotic language, right? And he's bringing in all these, I don't know what half of these things were, but I understood that I didn't know, and that he did, and that he wanted them. Also love the way that he brought in multiple senses with the taste, the irascible, whatever it was really lovely, friend. Anyway, very nice.
Vibration, irascible vibrations. That was an attempt to do what your friend did.
And it worked so beautifully there. That was very nice. Copying, I swear to goodness, friends, some people think, oh, you shouldn't ever try and copy someone else. That is total garbage. You should totally take somebody else's tools and try them on and see what you can do with them. And you know, people are like, but what, I don't want to write like Robert Frost. Oh yeah, good luck. You're not going to, you know, but you can take those tools and, you know, like learn, just like, that was such a great example, Ken. Thanks for doing that and saying even that that's what you were doing, because it did have a freshness in it, right? It definitely did. All right, Maria, let's hear from you next. And first, of course, I want to hear about your process.
Hello, it's good to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay. At first I was kind of resisting. I'm having a little, the mornings, I usually write at night too. So my mornings are off. I'm a very physical person. So I actually got up and walked around and then I'm always inspired by nature. So I'm sitting by this beautiful picture window here and there's a huge cottonwood in front of me and there's bird feeders. So that's kind of how I connected. And that was my jump off point. So I started with, I want to fly with the chickadees and goldfinch that come to my feeders, to chase a squirrel up and down and all around the trunk of one of the cottonwoods in my yard. I want to taste moonlight and to walk with the black bear that wanders through our neighborhood late at night. I want to sleep with a turtle deep inside her shell, to hang on a tree beside a ripe peach ready for picking. I want to ride on the back of an eagle riding a thermal, and to work side by side with the black ants carrying a dead cricket on our backs. I want to be the scent of honeysuckle. I want to taste the first cherry tomato on the vine. I want to be the thread that makes a beautiful dress and the needle that guides that thread. I wish to be the thought of hope that injects into the veins of mass consciousness, a serum of well-being, of knowing that all is really well.
Very nice. All right, this is wonderful. I love one thing in particular that Maria did, which was that she worked in the realm of concrete pretty much the entire beginning of the poem, right? And then did you notice how that lens pulled way out at the very end where she went into hope? It went basically from backyard to the planet, right? And it went from very concrete to very abstract when she went into that hope for, for all these people. That kind of movement, by the way, so important. All poems want to move. All poems want to if they don't move, then they're going to be boring. And one of those ways is to do that with that lens. There's many, many ways to do that, but that's one beautiful example of it. Thanks, Maria.
I just wanted to add that I had no idea that that's the way the poem was going to end.
Guess what? This is wonderful. And I love that too, because obey the poem's emerging form, right? I think a lot of these things are intuitive. I don't think that we often think them through, but I'll tell you what, if you notice when it works and why, then when things aren't working, it gives you some sense of, I'm stuck. What do I do? And that's a great tool to have, right? Oh, one way that a poem could move is from intimate to large. Another way it could move is from concrete to abstract, right? Or another way to say that would be from the physical world to the emotional world. So even though this time you did it, intuitively, because it's successful, and I do this with all poems, right? I think, what is making that poem work? Why was that so satisfying? Once you understand that, now it's yours, right? Now you can use that tool again and again and again, especially when things are not working.
It actually felt very, very vulnerable.
Oh, I bet it did. Yeah, because you went into the world of feeling.
Like I wasn't sure I wanted to put it
awesome. Well, that's what they say about the duende, right? Is that is very different from the muse. The muse sits on your shoulder and like sings to you, whereas the duende like gets inside you and pins you down and wrestles you and makes you go into uncomfortable places, right? So brava for following that. Nice job. Let's see, we'll hear from Nancy and then Elaine and Sherry. I see that you have also raised your hand, but we won't have time for it this time, but we'll try and get to you next time. So Nancy Murphy.
Yes, hi. So nice to be here. Thank you. I had a particular poem that I've been wanting to write, so I kind of started with that. The process was interesting because I kind of liked my first line quite a bit, and then it kind of just went blah. And then once I was like, okay, it can be blah. So it is definitely a rambling process. And then you kind of dip into little things. You're like, oh, I like that. Oh, I lost it. Okay. Keep coming back to I want. Okay. It's kind of it was like just a way to kind of start again.
Like an anchor, like a little, like it comes you back to where you were. Nice.
Yeah. And you can kind of start fresh. So it ended up being kind of all over the place, but, and I wanted more imagery, and I was really trying hard to shake up cliches, but I didn't really come up with anything clever. I think I was trying too hard. I'll just read a few lines then. It is quite rambling, but it was fun. And it gave me some things to start with to work on later. Like it's not quite a poem, of course, yeah.
I want to say something too, Nancy. I love what you just said about how you didn't come up with something clever. And I feel like clever is the biggest enemy of the poem, really. Like I feel like I'm glad you didn't find anything clever, right? Because truly none of us care about clever. Nobody does, really nobody does, except maybe the person who thinks they're clever, but nobody else cares about it. Like, what do we really want from a poem? We really want the poem to tell us what it's like to be alive, right? We want the poem to push us a little bit. We want the poem to open us up and shake us up a little bit. Well, I'm speaking for myself. That's what I want from a poem, right? I don't want a poem to tell me how clever the poet was. I will never care, ever. But if you tell something real, if you have something real, I will always care, right? Okay, so yay that you didn't have anything clever, and I can't wait to hear what you did right. Okay.
Great point. Thank you. Yes. I want to know why the tree sings. I want to touch the leaves that drip like candle wax to the ground. I want confetti leaves to rain down, cover my sins, hide my shame at turning away, my shame at my silence, my faults, my falsity. I want to climb into the arms of this tree and follow the lines of the bark to the center of your heart where it all started. We are all standing under some tree, the tree of death, the tree of life, the tree of transformation. I want to climb into this tree and rest, hang from my tail, sleep and eat like an animal. I want to know my animal. I want to know my God. I want to know this tree. The showering of falling leaves refreshes, restores. I want to know how we conquered trees and thought we knew better, how we ever thought we could subjugate trees, how they laugh at our attempts. I want a house that is all tree. I want a tree that houses. I want to apologize to this tree. I want to save this tree. I want to save myself. I want to save the world. I don't know where to start, so I will start with this tree.
Okay, wonderful. Let's give her some finger flashing. So one thing, Nancy, that I really appreciate about what you're doing, and I think is really wonderful for us all to kind of watch, right, is that, or to notice about how this poem is working, is that there's a weaving happening. And I love when poems weave. And at least 3 of those strands are the tree's story and the personal story, which involves shame. And then there's a larger story that involves the world, right? So what's happening with the tree, what's happening with this human, perhaps with another person, whoever's heart is inside that tree, and then the world story, and how all 3 of these keep kind of doing this. And you came back to them, you kind of laid them out in the beginning and came back to them at the end. There's this kind of chaotic thing happening, and then that glorious, I don't know where to start, so I'll start with the tree, right? Like bringing it back, simply back again. Very nice work. Beautiful. Nice job. Thanks, Nancy. And Elaine, let's hear from you, and then we'll do another poem and another little bit of writing.
Hi. I haven't written poetry, so this is new for me. My process, first I started with the Big Dipper, and then I went to the dead bud, dry bud on the geranium in the garden. And then the next thing I went was I wanted to speak with my unborn child.
Well, hold on. Okay. So Elaine, what about, so we'll get to that in the poem, but I'm curious about what happened in you. Like, what did you notice? Was it hard? Was it fun? Did you feel scared or excited? What did you notice about what happened in you?
I think I felt when I picked the Big Dipper first and asking how it stayed up in the sky without falling down. I think there was part of me that was saying that was a should. If hold on a minute. And but I could visualize the Big Dipper, and then I was shocked when I went to the dead brown bud on the geranium. Like, how did I jump from the Big Dipper to the dead brown? So, and then.
So you surprised yourself. You were like, what? Nice, very nice, very good.
And then the next, there was just my heart was asking me to speak with my unborn child.
Oh, friend. All right.
That I miscarried at 5 months. And then the whole rest of what I wrote about was that. But I wouldn't say it was a poem. It was just what came up and what I was longing for.
Do you want to share it?
Sure. I want to speak with the Big Dipper and ask how it is able to hold itself up in the sky without falling to earth. I want to speak with this dry brown bud on the orange geranium in the yard and ask how it feels as if while it was dying. I want to speak with my unborn child and ask if he watches over us. Does he want us to invite him into our family? Does he feel ignored, left out? Does he wonder how to insert himself into our dinner table? Would he ask us to get an extra chair and set a place for him? He would be 45 now. I want to meet his wife, his children. I want to ask him what career he picked. I want to know if he's ever returned to Earth and walks nearby. I want to ask him why he came here only for 5 months. I want to tell him I'm sorry I didn't have the forethought to ask the OBGYN to pull out the IUD so he could have had a chance to live. I see John going fishing with Jay, playing Monopoly with Sarah. My reading a bedtime story to all 3 of them. I want to know what John's favorite food is so I can cook it for him. I want to tuck him into bed. I want to help him learn his multiplication tables. I could never help him with plain geometry. I'd like to put an apron on him and ask him to cut up the portobello mushrooms while I cut up the sweet onions. I wonder why I've waited all these years to talk to him, what patience he's had. I want a psychic to tell me if John and I ever shared other lifetimes together and who we were. I see how alive this unborn child has become a new friend. I long for the phone to ring and pick it up and hear John say, "Hi, Mom, I want to tell you about the job offer I got today." I want to give myself some time to weep that he could never sit at our dining room table, fall in love, cut up mushrooms with me, and read a story to him.
Oh, Elaine, for number one, that is certainly a poem, if you had any doubt. I also want to say the vulnerability in that was exactly what I was trying to say when I was talking about who cares about clever. If you can deliver something true to me, a real, authentic, what's happening, like you just did, that's what my heart longs for in a poem, right? Is someone to really show up like you just did. And I also think something valuable just in terms of process to notice is that, notice how you began with the Big Dipper and then you went to the dead bud and then it became about this boy. And I really know that sometimes poems do that, right? Like we reach up and we look out to find what's actually happening here, right? And that vulnerability and that beautiful line, "Why did I wait so long to talk to him?" Right? Obviously, that's what really wanted to show up. And then you listened, right? You listened, you let it show up. You let it. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Elaine. That was gorgeous. Wow. Beautiful. Oh my goodness, friends. Isn't this why we write like that? This is why we get together on Saturday morning when it's gorgeous outside and you could be anywhere else doing something else, but instead we come together and we do this because it is so affirming as a human being to be engaged in a community like this. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. So we only have about 20 more minutes. Of course, I have at least 5 more hours of things for us to do. We won't do them all together. We'll end on time. But I do want to say, let's go ahead and look at another poem and we'll do some more writing. We just won't have much time to share it, but love to play a little bit more. So let's do it. Let's take a peek at the poem that is called, it's by Liesl Mueller. It's called What the Dog Perhaps Hears. Liesl Mueller, who came to America from Germany, and I know that she was friends with Veronica. She's one of my favorite American poets. And interestingly, about details, she said that of her first book, that she thought that she had burdened it. I think she said that it was over-decorated, that the poems were over-decorated. And I think about that, how sometimes we have just too much, and how sometimes a poem wants to resist all of that. I think in this poem, she certainly doesn't. This came from her next book, The Private Life. And let's have, I think in terms of time, we're just going to have one reader. I think that'll be okay this time. One person volunteer, please, to read. I know Milt had suggested that he would at one time. Milt, are you willing to be our reader? Melissa Huff, your hand is up. We'll take you. Thank you.
Okay, happy to. What the dog perhaps hears. If an inaudible whistle blown between our lips can send him home to us, then silence is perhaps the sound of spiders breathing and roots mining the earth. It may be asparagus heaving head first into the light and the long brown sound of cracked cups when it happens. We would like to ask the dog if there is a continuous whir because the child in the house keeps growing. If the snake really stretches full length without a click, and the sun breaks through clouds without a decibel of effort. Whether in autumn, when the trees dry up their wells, there isn't a shudder too high for us to hear. What is it like up there above the shut-off level of our simple ears? For us, there was no birth cry. The newborn bird is suddenly here, the egg broken, the nest alive, and we heard nothing when the world changed.
Beautiful. Thank you. Nice job. So this poem, I just love this poem. I love the way that she engages with what can't be heard. And I wanted to have just a small discussion about how sometimes the details that we can't perceive are even stronger than the friends. A little weasel has just come onto my porch. It is just I've never seen a weasel here before, ever. And he's so cute and strange. He just, who knows? It's very distracting actually to have a very cute little weasel out on my porch right now. Okay, back to Liesl Mueller's poem is about the things that are not in a poem are sometimes the things that we can't perceive are sometimes as interesting, maybe more interesting than the things that we can. So as we're choosing details for a poem, I want you to also consider and know that available to you is what you don't see, what you don't hear, what you don't taste, what you don't smell, all those things that you can't access. In this case, she's used the dog who can access something that we can't. And then she wonders about all these sounds that are possibly sounds that we aren't hearing, but that are available to be heard perhaps by someone. Take a look then at this little poem by Basho, which is on the page before. Very short little 3-line poem. The temple bell stops, but the sound keeps coming out of the flowers. The temple bell stops, but the sound keeps coming out of the flowers. This very quiet, small poem, again, focuses on 2 things. 1, the thing that isn't there, and 2, the thing that is. So right now, we're gonna take about 10 minutes and do some more writing. And Melissa Huff writes, I wonder what the weasel hears. I do too. I'm very curious about this little weasel. We're gonna take about 10 minutes and I'm gonna encourage you to write one of 2 things. I'm gonna give you 2 ideas. One is to write a series of very small poems, for 3-line poems. You can call them haiku if you want to. and otherwise you can just call it a 3-line poem. I'm going to encourage you not to worry about how many syllables there are. That's not what we're not thinking about form so much this time as we're thinking about how to use details. And I really want you to focus on what isn't here and then pair it with what is. So you would either have 1 line of what is here and then 2 lines of what isn't, or the opposite, right? 2 lines of what isn't, what is, and 1 line of what isn't. So just play around with that in very small format and see how tight those details can be. The other idea is to write a poem about what is not happening right now. And I would like you to choose just 1 sense and stick with it. So Liesl Mueller chose hearing. You could choose what you, and I'm going to encourage you not to do sight, just because we rely on that so much. If you could do what you do not smell, what smell is not happening, or what smells are not happening right now around you. What can you not hear? What can you not feel? And what can you not taste? I suppose those would be the 4. And just make, again, it's kind of a list poem, although you could go off and make it more of a very specific, engagement if you chose to, but the idea is a list. So 2 ideas for how to play in the next 10 minutes, and we will come back at it is 1/4 till, we'll come back at 5 minutes till. All right. So we don't have time, friends, to share what you wrote, but I wonder if a couple of people would be willing to share something that they feel like they're walking away with, something you feel like was helpful for you, something that came out of one of the poems, something that you heard someone else say, something that you think, oh yeah, I could do this in the future. Brenda, let's hear from you. But you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to remember where the mute button was.
Hi, Brenda. Nice to see you.
Hi. Yeah. Oh no, I just think this has been wonderful. I don't know. I've just really enjoyed it so much, and just thinking about stuff. And I like the poems that we read and that other people wrote and shared, and just kind of the way of looking at it, the details, thinking about the broader picture, how to choose when to be more detailed and when to just let it be. I think that first poem is just like, there were so many images that, oh yeah, everybody can connect with just that one word, a little box of soap or whatever, that everybody knows that, so you don't have to describe it in detail.
Very good. That you can take images people know well, and then you can back off of how much detail you need to offer. Great. Thanks, Brenda. Thanks for coming. Kathy, how about you?
You said, I want the poem to tell us what it's like to live. I'm going to keep hearing that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the whole thing. Really.
Oh, I'm so glad you were here. So good to see you, Kathy. Wish I could hug you in person. How about you, Laurel Becker?
I had to unmute. There were things you said about this poetry and about writing that I had not heard before. First of all, you're a good teacher. But when you said, when things go wrong, it has something to teach us. I've always thought that was a bad place to be.
Oh, yeah.
In writing. I mean, in my life, it's different, but in writing, I've always felt that. And then if you're stuck, lower your standards. And I get stuck from perfectionism.
Oh, me too, friend.
And I want it to be just right off the end of my pen, and it isn't, and I stop. So while I was writing today, I was saying those things to myself. In terms of the material itself, it was inspiring. It's inspired me to write in a little different way. I've always loved to use metaphor. I love to use all kinds of things that that were used in these poems, but they did bring in the concept of the abstract and the concrete, and how they work when you go from one to the other, from the other to one. And so thank you. It was a lovely workshop.
Thank you, Laurel. Thanks. Let's see, we'll hear from Jean Bell and then Sherry and then Val, and then we're going to hear from Lori to take us out for the afternoon. Jean.
Yeah, I really liked the idea of the cinematographer zooming in and zooming out. That really spoke to me as a way to make visual what we're doing in a poem. So thanks for the whole workshop, but especially for that.
Thanks, Jean. Yeah, that's helped me a lot too. And let's hear from Sherry.
Rosemary, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to be with you. I'm in Bowen Island outside of Vancouver in BC, and it's just wonderful to be with you. One thing I'd love to thank you for when you said, deliver something true, what our hearts long for in a poem. And it's also what I long for as a poet. And to be reminded of that so clearly. I am a photographer, and sometimes the metaphors are so obvious, I miss them myself. So thank you for that too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. And Val, you're last before we hand it over to Lori.
My rock star friend. Oh my gosh, so happy to be here. And so resourced. And so a couple thoughts. One is that taking a workshop with Aaron Abeta, is that how you say his name? Abeta. I remember him saying that if in your poem you make the reader's eyes move up and then down and in, or like you're saying macro, micro, or micro, macro, that the reader will feel moved.
Yes.
Won't know why, but they'll move with you, and it'll help them embody the poem more. And I really felt that today. And I also, like, the world is really freaking overwhelming right now, and I felt a lot of relief in these forms and these offerings. And I'm used to writing longer poems, so I played with that 3-line, what is in here, what is, and it's really a relief for me to drop in, because I just want to scream and scream and scream, and I know nobody's going to really want to listen. So if I can talk, I think this three, like the last one I wrote is screaming, 502 sorting machines dismantled, the posts that whisper loud enough to make a difference, dead ears. So I know this can be, for me, something really important. So thank you.
Thanks, Val. Thanks so much for coming. And thanks all of you for coming. It's been my great pleasure to get to hang out and play with you words today. You can find a lot of things on my website, by the way. I have lots of other classes that I've taught that are online that you can just take for free. They're right there, and you can press pause so that you can do your writing in the middle of them. They're right there in the news section, probably, of my website. I want to thank again Veronica and Rebecca and Lynn and Lori. Take us out.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary, thank you so much for coming. I realized this was a last minute switch. Chloe was ill, and you have jumped in and just done a beautiful job and led us on journeys. So thank you very much. I want to very quickly tell you about 2 upcoming events through the Poet Laureate program. On Thursday, September 10th, we will have a reading called 3 Voices, Roots, Place, and Community, featuring Aaron Abeta, Seth Harris, and Banu Kapil. And Banu may still be in London, but through the wonders of Zoom, we can have her here. The second event is Sunday, September 20th. This is our quarterly reading, usually at the Loveland Museum, but this will be by Zoom also. Sunday afternoon from 1 to 3. It will be a reading based on John Keats' poem, To Autumn. So that'll be the theme of autumn poems, featuring poetry, music, and an open mic. So if you're interested in reading, register early. You will need to register for both events. Let's see, we will be sending out information about how to support our events. If you liked what you did this weekend, if you'd like to support future events, you can make a donation either to Columbine Poets or through the Poet Laureate program, and we'll send you details pretty soon and getting up closer to those dates as well. Thank you everyone for coming. Stay well, write lots, and we hope to see you the next time around. So thank you very much.